All right, guys, we are live. This is our first live event, so I'm gonna have to check out YouTube now just to make sure that we are live. Let's see here. Where's my YouTube?
Yeah, I have no idea how this works. Is there like
Ben's like, I think it's live. Oh yeah, it's on a little delay. All right, I gotta shut that down so that it doesn't. So if you're out there, I threw out from our Xbyte Solutions, or from our provider who kind of runs everything for us, on their YouTube account. I threw out a question. So where, and I apologize for my lack of a word. Where are you joining from? All right, so CSG is out there. He can hear and see you. Okay, that's awesome. All right, so we have no idea how this is gonna turn out. So for everybody who's tuning in, I guess probably just CSG there. Maybe our parents will join us, but yeah. So this all came from a conversation that Ben and I were having, where one of his favorite meetings of the week was kind of an open, a brown bag architecture meeting where just anyone could come and ask questions. They could go there, they could answer questions. It's just kind of an open forum. And so that was kind of the catalyst. And then I was also chatting with Mark Takata on something kind of unrelated from Adobe. And he had mentioned that he had office hours at some point where anyone could kind of jump on and chat with him. But he was not doing that anymore. So all right, let's do this and see what happens. So CSG is joining from Albany, Oregon. Oh,
there's also in Albany, New York, I'm from New York.
Are you from Albany, New York?
No, but Albany's about an hour north of me.
Okay. We have Peter joining us too. All right, so how this is going to work? I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to share a link here because this is not all about Ben and I. It's about everybody. So I think I can, and we promise we will get better at this.
This is a maiden voyage here.
Yes. So invite guests, copy. All right, so I'm going to paste this into, if anyone would like to join us on stage, I'm posting we use StreamYard as our platform. And you can click on that link and you can come on and we'll add you to the stage, and you can, if you have something you want to talk about, I'll throw out another softball. I know I throw out where are you calling from. I'm from Bradenton, Sarasota, Florida, so just south of Tampa. Before we actually turned on our live camera feed, Ben and I were talking, and I was complaining about how it's not even going to hit 70 today, and it's going to be. I mean, and we're only going to have 3 days in the 70s this upcoming 10-day.
Unbearable.
So, yeah, and I had to bundle up. I think all the women out are wearing their UGG boots because it's in the 60s. That means it's winter weather.
I think it's in the 30s here. I think it's like 30 degrees today, maybe. But it's been in the 20s and 30s lately. Here in New York, I'm in 2 hours north of New York City. But I grew up in New York. Not the city, but New York State, the lower Hudson Valley. It's kind of the southern tip of New York.
And for anyone who didn't realize it, and before I started really kind of looking at New York, I just hadn't thought about it because I thought of New York City as New York. But New York's huge.
New York's pretty huge.
There's a lot of New York that's not NYC.
You know what I just learned, though, recently is that Alaska crosses like 4 time zones, but they're all on Alaska time. It's all the same time. At least that's what I'm told. Hopefully I'm not spreading lies here. But
okay.
I guess that would make sense, though, for an area where it's dark, weeks out of the year, and then sunny weeks out of the year. Maybe time zones just don't have as much meaning.
So for all of our listeners here, if I say all in quotes here, I don't know how many we have our first live event, but if you have questions, shoot them in the chat. Join us. I posted that link out there. So if you want to come on, you don't have to turn on your video. So if you just want to come on and turn on a microphone or something, you'll have a little picture of a person there representing you. So you could definitely come and join us. I'll see you. Or if you have questions, you can throw it out there. If anyone's been watching the show and has any feedback for us, we'd love to hear it. If you have things you want us to bring guests on to chat about things, we've been doing a lot more reach out to bringing on guests. Well, Ben and I do love just chatting with each other. We also sometimes have fun to have other people, and so we have some exciting guests. We have some AI guests coming on. We have people talking about careers as a developer, like your career choices, where you can be a developer, individual contributor forever. You could be a manager. You could go into sales. You could go into kind of product, and kind of talking about the different choices you have. So that'll be an interesting one to kind of have people kind of hear about that, especially if people are early on in their careers and thinking about, hey, do I go into management? You actually hear from several people who have gone through that transition and what it meant to them, including I think both of us. Where Ben, I think you've been an individual contributor. I think you had a team.
I've dabbled in management.
Yeah.
Somewhat reluctantly. I think individual contributor is just where my happy place is. But one day, perhaps, we'll see.
All right, we have someone coming on board right now.
What?
Hey.
Right. Welcome.
Mr. Amiri.
Oh, that's my name. I need to change my name. How do I
Ben
change
knows
that
everybody.
Name?
There's a little like ellipse next to 3 dots on your picture. You can click on that and it says like edit name and title, I think. And you can have a fun title.
Yeah, please. Ecamm is my father. Please call me Peter.
Ben, I have a small screen here. You are a bit flipper. Ah.
Yeah, it's hard to come up with new stuff.
So yeah, because we're doing live, I went with working without a net, because we have no post production crew, which we're very easy on post production, or they don't. If as long as I stay powered up, we don't normally have any large edits needed. So Peter, welcome.
Thank you.
You are live, heard around the world.
Where are you calling from, Peter?
I am from Southern California, San Juan Capistrano.
So how close are you to all of the fires? Hopefully not close.
I'm about 50 or 60 miles south.
Okay, south.
Yeah.
It's too close for comfort. Is the air quality? Are the fires still going right now?
They're still going. They're still going. They're still working on it. I'm getting a huge echo, but trying to.
Let me make sure I'm not turning on any speakers.
It's almost like a 5-second delay. So I hear you guys.
Oh, you have you have the YouTube. Shut down the YouTube while you're here.
Yeah. Or mute it.
I got the stream going on at the same time.
Yep.
There we go. Okay. So the fires are north of us. We're in Orange County. The closest family member is my son, is like 10 miles away from the Eaton fire and 5 miles away from the evacuation zones. So we're keeping an eye on it. We got a bunch of the initial ash and soot is the best way I can describe it last week. So it just so happens that last weekend I power washed the driveway and the backyard and everything. And by Tuesday, everything's black.
You're like, forget it. Never doing that again.
Yeah, it's God's joke on me. So.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, on the news they were saying that not to put celebrities in a spotlight, but Billy Crystal's house burned down and Martin Short's house burned down.
Yeah.
And Martin Short, I think, has been living in that house for like 40 years or something.
Yeah, I mean,
just devastating.
There's a lot of displaced people. I mean, the biggest thing right now is you have 10,000 homes, 100,000 people. All of them are looking for temporary housing. Eventually they're going to go into some sort of a rebuild cycle. So construction, supplies, manpower, all these things. It's almost like COVID on overdrive. We went through a lot of remodels during COVID where people are hunkered down. They're not spending a lot of time outside of the house, so they're redoing things. So there was a shortage of people and manpower to do all these things, but this is going to be on that overload.
And on the East Coast, we just went through the hurricanes. So you have Florida, you have North Carolina, all hit pretty big with hurricanes, and now we have the West Coast being hit. And so, the construction. I don't even know where we're going to find people to do all the rebuilds.
Exactly. Yeah.
But Peter, we're welcome to. This is a live. We have no script, and we're just kind of going with.
I love it that way.
So, did you have a question you want to kind of throw out to the audience, or have us chat?
No, I saw Ben comment on your post. And I'm like, oh, this sounds like fun. I'm going to jump on.
Perfect.
My task this morning is to set up the old days where in Adobe and Lucy you could set up a data source and set it up to be your session repository, and then set up your cluster to be session based to that data source. I used to have it done a long time ago, and we went away from it because we had sticky connections set up on the load balancer, so it was irrelevant. But I have a need to turn off the sticky connections because now we're in a transition between an old domain and a new domain. And the sticky connections are domain-based cookies on the old domain, so they don't work in this transition phase. when you use the new domain, it still doesn't know you're logged in, so you go to a different server. So that was my task this morning, and I was starting to go, I gotta look for some old articles because I know there's no new articles on this. It's gonna be at least 5 years old, whatever I find. And I figured, I'll find something on Ben's site to tell me how to do this.
So did you already find it?
I just started. I've been in a bunch of other meetings this morning too, so I haven't looked. But that's my task to do today. So if you guys want to talk about that, go for it. Otherwise, we can talk whatever you want, and I'll just play the fly on the wall.
All right, I checked it on the YouTube. I know there's at least four other people, because there's 7 people watching. Actually, I can see it on the screen right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump off my YouTube feed then. So there's at least 3 other people. So if anyone has any experience with what Peter was just describing with his sessions, and switching off of a load balancer, please chime in. Or Ben, if you know of your post that you share with everybody already about a topic, please share.
I'll only say that at work we had to switch away from sticky sessions. From years ago, even when we were embracing the kind of in-memory session management, we would have issues with our load balancer where if we had to update machines, we would take a machine out of the load balancer, but the load balancer, I think it was a little bit buggy, would continue to try to send traffic because people were pinned to that particular server. Yeah. So it's like it became very challenging for us to have sort of a rolling update of servers because it was very hard to. We lost somebody.
Yeah, he's Southern California. Who knows? Hopefully he's not bad. Hopefully he's okay. But go.
Oh, God.
Oh, he's back.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And setting up. So we used to have this set up to a Postgres cluster that basically the only thing it was used for was for the session management. And then we had an instance where the Postgres cluster stopped working, and our entire environment is Windows-based. The Postgres cluster plus some other boxes are on Linux. So the quick fix was let's turn off the session management, go to sticky sessions, and it's on the back burner to come back to and get it to work. So I was going to try to get it to work with a SQL Server cluster. So I just need to, I know the process. You basically have to set up a data source pointing to your database server. There's a checkbox in Lucy where you turn it on to say, enable this for session management or something to that effect. I don't know the verbiage off the top of my head. That creates the databases that you need. And then you have to go in and tell it to use that data source for your session management. And then it'll start sticking the sessions in there. So conceptually, I know how to do it. It's just, I remember when I first turned it on with the SQL Server, it didn't work. It created the tables, but it didn't really kick in. So I'll just have to figure out how to get that to work, but it should be easy enough to do. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have written about this historically. Like I said, I mean, it's one of those things you set up once and you forget about it. And then
right,
the
exactly.
time you set it up is because it's broken. Now you're under the gun and nobody remembers how to do it.
Yo, for real.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that, as Misha was saying in the chat, that Redis, I think, can also be now used for a lot of the clustered session management stuff. The pattern that we've been using at work, and then also which I've been just dabbling with as well, is turning off the native session management, setting session management to false and then setting client cookies to false, and basically just saving the session information in a database table a little bit more manually. So if you imagine that a request comes into the ColdFusion server and it's passing along your CFID and CF token cookies, and the session management, more or less, if I hand wave here, is really just saying, let me take those cookies, associate it with some space in memory, and then here's your session object. And we basically just do that line or, a couple lines of code manually. I'm not saying that's any better. I'm just saying that that's when we had to overcome the sticky session stuff. That was the route we chose. We just moved it to the database and then just started doing it manually.
Yeah, and probably at the end of the day, that is gonna be the route to take, because I've also used the Redis before, but again, Redis requires you to have an extension installed in Lucy. And every now and then I remember having problems with the extension. So I think at the end of the day, what you're describing, Ben, is probably the route we're gonna have to take, which is take a little bit more ownership, have full control, rather than rely either on the automated session management on a third-party extension for Lucy that may or may not have edge case side effects. So yeah.
There's always something nice about just throwing stuff in a database. And not, I don't want to be one of those people where it's like when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But I feel
but it does.
When you have a relational database, I feel like everything looks like a record.
Yeah.
You could just throw it in there.
Peter, you threw up Postgres earlier. Why? And this is a conversation Ben and I have had on an episode before. Why the decision to go with Postgres?
So the only reason I used that, and it was the decision was made to see if we could migrate from SQL Server over to this Postgres. So I call it Postgres, but it's really not Postgres. It's a third party. It's a rework of the Postgres engine, so to speak, to get clustering. So I think it's called CockroachDB.
Oh, sure.
So CockroachDB is basically it allows you to have a multi-node cluster that to your client looks like a Postgres database. So your applications talk to it through a Postgres driver, and to it looks like a Postgres driver and Postgres database, but it's active multi-node database. So
Oh,
you
nice.
can write to any of the nodes and it will hot sync the values across. You can actually have clusters in multiple data centers, and it will hot sync across the data centers.
Really?
So it gets you, and the reason I was interested in it is because, we have a single node MySQL, MS SQL Server,
SQL Server.
node, and every time we have to do Windows updates, and Microsoft is notorious about pushing out Windows updates, and they, in fact, yesterday they pushed out a ton of Windows updates, so all my Windows servers are complaining today. But every time we have to do that, we got to take our applications offline and create a service window and all that stuff. And my idea was it would be wonderful if we could have a multi-node environment where you can take one of the nodes offline, do whatever you need to do, updates and patches or whatever, and then bring it back, let it sync itself to the cluster, and then you take the next one offline, and your applications never have to suffer. And if that all worked fine and great and we understood it, then we could have a cluster in our DR site where it's just sitting there getting updates, so that you have a live secondary cluster ready to go in case your primary cluster chokes, or the data center chokes, or what have
Or
you.
needs
So
to be updated.
yeah, I mean, so that was the thought process,
Right.
that this will allow us to get some of that flexibility that we needed.
All right, so I'm going to pose a couple comments here from Misha.
Yep, I'm seeing.
I think this was in response to the question, why Postgres?
Yep.
And I think free is probably a good reason.
Free is nice.
Yeah.
Free is nice.
But it sounds like the Cockroach DB also sell. I mean, the normal SQL Server, you can't do this distributed databases. So you're having to go to the Enterprise Edition.
Even in the Enterprise Edition, you can have. It's my understanding that you can have. You can't have a multi-node active. You can have a active passive and set up a storage that is shared or attached to by both nodes. So it helps in the sense that if your node dies, their secondary node can pick up, and as long as you have a shared storage environment that both of them can attach to. So we could achieve this in SQL Server, but I wanted to see if there's a better way to do it. And Cockroach, I haven't given up on Cockroach. I just think me being, SysOps and DevOps is not my primary role, but I've been in the business long enough to, jack of all trades, master of none. so I can get things up and running. But hey, if things go awry, it's good to have someone that's a little bit more versed in the sysadmin side of Linux. And I think I have someone like that on the team now. So I may go back to it and say, hey, can you get this working and make sure it is working, and then just maintain it on, I'm sure just like anything else, once you get it up and running, you can't forget about it. You have to do the updates and maintenance and make sure you're looking at the database and that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So
Misha with another comment out there about MS SQL. So apparently, if you want always on, it previously required a domain controller, but in a recent release, it can be done without.
Yeah, so we're in a domain environment, so having domain controller isn't, or not having one isn't that big of an issue. The biggest issue really comes to, other than DR, and perhaps
DR is disaster recovery.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Other than disaster recovery, or your main node fails and the secondary node can pick up, it gets us beyond what we are doing right now, because obviously it'll serve its purpose for doing Windows updates, but it wouldn't. Then you can't extrapolate from that to, oh, can I have multi-node active-active? Well, I suppose I could, because I can set up replication from the primary cluster to the secondary cluster. So I don't know. It's Cockroach is just so much cooler when you see the demos.
And I believe I listened to an interview with the founder. I don't know, maybe 2 years ago or something, and I think they said that the naming itself, Cockroach, is because it's so focused, on
you can't kill it.
It's like cockroaches and Cockroach DB will be the only thing to survive a nuclear holocaust.
Right. Yeah. So
you know what? I'm gonna have to bring on make sure Dakota joins us for the next one for some of these like more systems questions, because I'm sure that they've dealt with switching session management for customers in the past.
Right. And Dakota, for those listening, he's the CTO of XByte Cloud.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, I sometimes forget that not everyone knows Dakota. So,
but the whole active node thing is it's so fascinating. It feels very much like the holy grail of distributed programming. Whenever I read about resilient systems, I feel like there is some light hand waving over what I assume is a very complex topic, where they talk about replication and they say, oh, it's really not a huge deal. All you have to do is make sure that you always read from the same database you write to. And I'm like, well, that's a huge if. How are you just waving over that? That feels like a very complicated architectural pattern.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if Cockroach DB essentially handles that kind of stuff for you, so that you're
It does. And I've actually tested it. Within milliseconds of writing to one node, you can read from a different node that data element. So it's
like in different geographies. Like,
yeah, I mean it's dependent on obviously the pipe that you have between.
Yeah.
So if you put it on a 5600K modem, it's going to take you a while to get that data across. But in most modern connectivity apparatuses that we have, it's super quick. So cool.
There's Dave posting wow. I think we're all sharing the same comment.
Well, I was listening to I don't know if this was someone from Cloudflare, but they were talking about how this concept of edge computing, where you're trying to move computing power to essentially what is now these CDNs, which have been evolved to be much more robust. But if you can't have something like a multi-active node database, someone might make a request in California and your database still lives in Virginia at US East 1. And if you try to do processing on the West Coast and you have to make multiple database calls back to Virginia, it's actually going to be slower than actually just making the whole processing happen in Virginia. And that way the database is on the next rack and it's instantaneous. So if you can get that replication, that seamless replication, that seems like it really opens up latency reduction possibilities like never before.
Yeah. So we had, I could tell you a story about that. So about 2-3 years ago, so I'm in a unique environment where we run our own data center, just because I come from that world. I come from the hosting world and everything. I know how to set up data centers and what have you. So we've got our own virtualization environment. We run about 180 VMs in that environment. Got 600 terabytes of storage in that environment. So we got plenty of bandwidth and storage and what have you. So I'm not against cloud, but I'm not there. I'm in my own data center. So I wanted to set up a DR site. So we ordered, and so I was gonna order another set of virtualization environment, put it in the DR site, and do snapshot replication of my VMs over there. So I have it running in my other environment. And very early on in this process, we set up a 10 gig connection between our data center in Georgia to our data center in Texas. Ordered a upgraded environment as well as a DR environment. So the DR environment was disk-based. The upgrade environment was just, NVMe drives and just the fastest thing we could get our hands on. And things got mixed in translation. So the DR cluster went to Georgia, and the upgraded cluster went to Texas. And we didn't realize this until it was being racked in Texas. And somebody made a comment and goes, "You got a lot of disk space in these." And I go, "Yeah, it's, it is a DR site, but it's spinning this." And go, "Nah, these are, sticks. So these are NVMe drives." And I look and I go, "Oh."
No.
So very early on in the process, we're like, okay, what do? We just spent, half a day racking and stacking all these. There's another set of boxes, hosts sitting in Georgia. Do we unrack these and send them back, or do we, go through the process? And we made a very early decision to say, hey, it doesn't matter where these things run. Let's just bring up the production environment in Dallas. We've got a 10 gig pipe across, and we'll set it up. So our main campus is in Georgia, and there's a lot of we have, servers running in a VM in the data center that actually print, POs on a printer in the office and that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
So, old school. So we set this up. Theoretically, it all worked. But then some things were really, really slow. And when we try to get our mind around it, it's like, okay, people are coming in to an IP that's served out of the Georgia data center. Then they're going over the 10 gig pipe to hit the Texas data center to get to the load balancer. The load balancer is sending them to a VM there, but that VM is now calling back to Swanee, and then it's going back. And it was like going back and forth so much, just like what you described, Ben, that it was slower, even though the raw horsepower we had was faster. And we kept, tweaking it. Well, there's no reason for them to have to come across that 10 gig. We're making API calls to a third party like TaxJar or something like that. There's no reason for them to come in, go to Dallas, come back, go out to TaxJar, come back, go to Dallas, hit the application server, then come back. Why don't we just make them go out TaxBar? So we kept tweaking it and tweaking it. And after 3 months into this, I said, you know what? Why are we doing this? Just unrack the servers, ship them to where they are. We'll ship the DR servers back there and do what we intended to do. And but that was the ultimate faux pas, where since we had 2 orders of 2 environments, and they got swapped, and people didn't realize until it was too late. And we try to make it work, but other than moving everything, and we couldn't, because there was so much legacy stuff that it had to talk to, that it was like, oh, let's just tear it down and revert back to what we had planned. So that's my story.
Coming from the server space, our sister company, Exabyte Technologies, sells tons of servers every day. And it's not an easy task to unrack stuff, put it back in the boxes, and then ship it, because that's on day 0. Yeah. Because the second you don't put foam in the right place, you're risking that server moving in transition, because it's not easy in the trucks of FedEx or UPS.
Yeah. So exactly. So the reason that I made the decision that I made is because we're actually in a data center that doesn't allow cardboard to go into the data center floor. So you have to unbox your servers in the holding place, throw all of your boxes and everything into the dumpsters and shredders and everything, and then you can wheel your equipment to the floor. So we had already destroyed any possibility of using the same boxes to ship the servers to a different location. So that's why we said, the likelihood of these things getting damaged in transit going back is probably more than us having to figure out and running in here. So let's just go with it. But that was the wrong call, and it ended up being the wrong call.
I mean, if anyone's looking to ship servers, be careful with that. I would advise talking to someone who does shipping.
Yeah.
We had to do test runs on our boxes and our foam and all those inserts to make sure that the servers would not be damaged, even in multiple shipments. Because sometimes we ship to a reseller who then ships it to their end customer. So, sweet account for that. And Peter, if you need servers, you can always call us. Also help you with that.
Thank you.
Subtle. Very subtle, Ryan.
Subtle. I love it.
Well, let me ask. First of all, I just want to acknowledge that Mark has joined the
Mark,
call.
thank you.
I feel like it's very awkward to not acknowledge. Welcome, sir.
Sorry I'm late.
No worries. I did just have one question because I do remember way back in the day when we were on a single server at, I think it was like hosting.com or Host My Site. And then I think we moved to Edge Web Hosting. I don't know if that still exists. But we were storing everything right on like a small local network attached storage. And I think it had like 4 terabytes or something, or 2 terabytes. Like it wasn't very huge. This was 13 years ago. Yeah. And at one point we asked the hosting company, hey, we need to store more information, JPEGs, that kind of stuff. How can we do that? And they said, well, we can get you a specialized network storage that can hold, it was like 50 terabytes or something like that. But they didn't have it. We would have to essentially buy it for them, and then they would install it. And it was a non-trivial. Yeah. They wanted, I think, an upfront down payment of like $50,000 or something. Probably, yeah. So when you say that you, in your own data center, are storing, what did you say, 60 terabytes, 600 terabytes, 600 terabytes? Like that's a lot of information. How are you? I mean, I don't know if this is proprietary. I don't know if you can't tell how the sausage is made, but how are you storing 600 terabytes?
So the raw capacity,
nowadays that's 30 drives.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Nowadays that's 30 drives.
I mean, okay. Yeah. The last time
so drives have gotten bigger, and everything. Bigger. So, and that is raw disk space, obviously, and the clustering and everything, and deduping and all that stuff. It gives you a smaller usable. But yeah, I mean, there's things have advanced.
Yeah. Okay.
And virtualization platforms have also advanced. If I make sense, your raw drives, the capacity and the speed and stuff like that have advanced to the point where you can have bigger, faster solid state drives, but also our virtualization environments have advanced to the point where clustering them and everything. Because I remember, 2003-ish, my MySpace days, to stand up a data center, it was like $200,000 just to get the load balancers, firewall, and edge routers. You're just talking $200,000, and you haven't even done anything for servers behind it. So you throw in 10 servers, that's another $200,000. So you're $500,000 in just to test your pilot. That's the beauty of cloud, because it has so normalized everybody's ability to be able to take an idea and throw it out into the world and see if there's any traction. And that's something we didn't have, 10, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah. Coming from the infrastructure side of things, I'd be hard pressed to just talk to a small business and say, or someone in a startup and say, oh yeah, start your own data center or have your own servers on-prem. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, if nothing else, you don't have the expertise to maintain them.
That's the thing.
You know what? Yeah. Put that in the cloud, and you're offloading all of that. I mean, not just because there's a logo next to me, but
not what that is.
but I mean, we also talk to people about. Actually, I'll just stop here. Dave asked a question. SSDs. Peter, I believe you have an NVMe and probably for your NVMe, for your main cluster, for your DR, probably just spinning disks.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so the DR cluster, I believe there's 30, 25 or 30 disks in each of the 2U servers, and I think 5 of them are SSDs, and the rest are huge spinning disk. And it's just the virtualization environment will prioritize moving individual blocks of storage around to make the hot storage blocks more accessible outside of us having to do
whatever's
anything.
used more.
Yeah, whatever's used
Yeah,
more moves towards the SSDs, and whatever's not stays on the disks. And this is just a snapshot repository for us. So it's always every night it's running snapshots in the main environment, automatically ships it over to the other environment. So we have the ability of turning on a VM in the DR site, cloning it, shipping it back, or just running it where it is, because the network is spans across both sites. So
and for those listening who are not familiar with the hardware, your SAS or your nearline SAS for your spinning disks, or SATA, and the SAS, a lot of times they're merging now to about the same price point per terabyte. Then you have your normal SSDs. Then you're going to have NVMe SSDs, which are the next generation of those, and they're going to be a little bit faster. There's also even higher end if you want to get closer to the bus, as far as just memory. Now they have just the specialized memory storage that are beyond their SSDs. It all depends on your performance needs. And I was just having a conversation with somebody because they were trying to tell me that, oh no, you could never have your own servers. No one does that because and they're talking about the cost of the technology. Even SSDs is not there yet. And I'm like, no. If you want your high performing NVMe's, you're at maybe a 2.5x of slow disks for NVMe performance. That's cheap. That is cheap.
There is a class of people that get so large on a one of the public cloud providers that their monthly spend on the cloud provider is so much. It's in the 6 to 7 digits, if you can believe that. And at that price point, then you can take 2 or 3 months spend, and you can pay for the infrastructure that you would need to stand up. And then, you have probably 5 or 10x the amount of storage and capacity that you are paying for in the cloud providers. Yeah, you definitely have to know how to set that up, how to secure it, how to run it, how to maintain it. But at that cost structure, you probably can hire the people to help you do that, and it makes a lot more sense. And there's a lot of articles where people are fleeing the public clouds for that on the top end, not on the bottom end. I think there's a lot of value to be placed on the bottom end and getting things off the line. And if you structure and architect your application where you're using a lot of the platform services, the queues and what have you, it makes it much more difficult. And that's why they do it. But it makes it much more difficult to switch platforms. If you maintain at your compute node level, at least you can change those compute nodes between environments rather quickly. But then if you get into bed with a particular vendor, whether it's the Azures or AWS or Google's of the world, then you're kind of locked to that platform, and it's very difficult to move. And I don't know enough about it because I haven't had to do it, but I think there is a whole ecosystem of middleware players that try to provide a platform that you can write to that then will migrate between environments. But I don't know how well that works.
You also have to watch out for your egress fees. A lot of times they'll get you because if you try and pull any data out, it's a fortune to try and do that. Not only just to try and do it technically, but the cost for pulling that data. We see a little curve where, like, early on, startups will use cloud, and then you go to a point where it's like, okay, now the bill's too expensive, and I can actually now pay someone to maintain my own servers. So then they move on-prem. So they're on-prem for a little bit, and they're like, wow, okay, this is a lot. Let me try out. I may want some workloads because it depends on how fast you need to scale, because the auto scaling in public cloud, you really can't touch on-prem.
Yeah.
So if you need that auto scale, the people that we manage they're in the cloud, they need that. They're not consistent workloads, so they need to ramp up very quickly. And yeah, for that cloud is a perfect platform for something like that.
Yep.
Well, Mark, welcome. We've been kind of chatting with Peter, and I hope everyone listening has been getting some value, kind of some infrastructure stuff. Misha, thank you. I think Boston was by no shipping issues. This was not the intention of mentioning X-Byte anywhere close to this much on a broadcast, but I thank everybody. But Mark, welcome. You're in the weeds of CF 2025. So
Is that coming out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you guys in beta 2 right now?
No, we had a small hiccup. It's now scheduled to launch in a couple days, but beta 2's, literally final testing. We're putting the bows on it. It's ready to drop. So it'll drop this week.
I'm waiting for my M1 Docker images. Fingers crossed.
Those may not come. M1 I think will. No. Sorry. The Windows ones I don't think made it, but I think the M1 ones did.
Nice.
Because people were actually asking for it.
Yeah. I had mentioned it in the forums, and someone said it was going to be in the next beta.
Yeah. So the M1s, yes. The Windows ones, we actually went back looking for who was looking for it, and the tickets were like 5 years old or something. Like it was way back, and so we're like, well, if nobody's mentioned it since then. But the M1s have been a topic of conversation fairly consistently. So yeah, hopefully those will drop. The theming for charting, that should be there, and then the new OAuth stuff, plus all of the removals, the stuff that's actually getting from deprecation to removal should be dropping for the most part. I think.
Ooh, what's going to removal?
Oh my gosh, a lot. Yeah, it's the biggest pruning ever in any Cold Fusion. Yeah. Oh, you haven't seen the list? Shoot, let me see if I can find the list. So, these are all things that have been deprecated. Some for, I think there's one thing that's getting removed that's been deprecated. Help me out here, Ben. Is defined. What was the what did is defined replace?
I think is null to replace
parameter exists. Correct? No, it's parameter
Yes.
exists. Has been deprecated since I feel like since
I don't even think I knew that one.
Yeah, parameter exists has been deprecated since like the early 2000s or late 90s, and it's finally gone.
You've had your warnings.
Yeah, so if you're still using that, bad kitty.
Is struck key exist still there?
Oh, you gotta have struck key exist.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Don't take that away.
Wait a minute. I started panicking.
Yeah.
We're keeping that. There's a few things that like I've had people panic on, like template by path or something like that is going away, and people like completely, oh my god, what? And it's like, no, this I guarantee you, go look at your code. You're not using that. You're using like something that's slightly different that was added at some point, and the old one just hasn't been updated. There's security issues with it. Like nobody's using it. It's been deprecated for years. Several versions. Like everything that's deprecated that's going away has been deprecated for 2 or 3 versions at minimum. So hopefully you're not using it. There's a few things that are from the like the security authentication, hashing, encryption side that are going to maybe cause some headaches. CF
MX Compat.
That one is not only getting like, and that's been like we've been deprecating it for a while, but it's just going away. There's no flag for it either. So if you're using that, start refactoring now. So there's a few things that are going to be a pain point. Some of the stuff I've been doing this 30 years. I was like, what the heck is that? I had to like look into it. I'm like, oh, all right. Yeah, I didn't even realize that was still a thing. So really good removals. It's going to make it so that the shipping code is cleaner. It's easier to test. It's reducing our regression testing and automated testing load by a lot. And it's just, it's reducing surface area for attack.
Right.
Because these are old, dusty. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, CSG.
Get template
Yeah.
path.
Yeah, it's get base template path instead of get template path. So that's where people panic and they're like, what? No, I use that everywhere. And I'm like, no, you probably don't. You use base template path. And that was my reaction was like, no. I use that all the time. I just used it. And then I looked at my own code. I'm like, oh no, I use get base template path. Okay, never mind. No need to panic.
Yeah, I don't know this function. I have to look it up.
Putting on my
That's right.
CF Wheels hat, we're already
I'll flag it up
testing
here.
against 2023 and passing all our tests. So
Nice.
Cool. Against 23 or 25?
23, I haven't tested against 25 yet.
Let me get you in the beta.
Okay.
Beta. It's free. It's open. Yeah, let's get you in there because we should get you testing against that. Not a ton has changed. However, some things have. And if most of the things are like, if you program well, it's not an issue, but some people had some legacy stuff that would break deep in their code, like the whole implicit thing. Sorry about that. You should be explicitly scoping your variables. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. You can throw arrows at my face, but I've been doing that for 30 years. So if I can do it, I'm a terrible programmer. So everybody else should do it too. But yeah, a couple of those things kind of broke horribly.
But those flags exist though, correct?
Not in 25. 25, those flags are gone, my friend. Yeah, no, we cannot. We allowed it in 23 because people needed to refactor, but they're gone in 25 because we can't allow people to expose themselves that way. It's just a security concern. Yeah, and I apologize to everyone who's going to work late nights on that, but it's just it's pulling the Band-Aid off. Right. At the end of the day, that security concern is so heinous that it just makes me lose sleep knowing that people are out there with that flag going. Right. And it's not external. It's not a 0 day. It's not out there. Nobody that I'm aware of has ever attacked this successfully. That doesn't mean that they can't. Right. So let's get things fixed before that happens. And then it's just a free for all and madness and chaos and all that. So,
so a couple comments on that. I'm excited that we were actually talking to Charby on a podcast earlier, and she had mentioned that as we deprecated what's still available, both the flags for the implicit scopes and the encryption algorithms. But that was I was we were talking about this is when we had Brian Sappy with us. We were talking about, I think Ben, you made already, a few weeks ago. Ben, you may already left.
This may have changed. Okay, so let me back slightly out of it. So the decision had been made a few months back that we were going to go full boat removal, all this stuff. It's possible that some of our larger clients have just sort of called on us to give them another version. So let me go back and double check that. I do know there was one extremely large client, one of the biggest code bases I've ever seen. They're well over 1 million lines of code. They had identified like over 500,000 lines that would have to be changed in the implicit scope. 500,000, yeah. Which is, made me sort of cry, like, oh, what did you guys do to your code? But I get it, right? It's a very old code set. They're a very large client, and they were like, please, like we can't, we want to be on the most modern thing, but we also can't fix 500,000 lines of code in whatever it's going to be, a year, 2 years. Like this is a 2, 3, 5 year project.
And so just to be clear, sorry,
go ahead.
Just to be clear for people listening, when Mark is saying that you have to have explicitly scoped variables, this is not for all scopes. The language will continue to allow things: local scope, argument scope, variable scope.
Right. Scope enclosures. Your scope enclosures
Right.
does not have to be explicit.
So this is more for things like the form scope, URL scope, cookie scope, query scope, that kind of stuff.
Server.
Server,
Yep.
yeah. That
Yeah,
was the
that's
thing that
the-
always drove me crazy is the people who loop over a query and then don't reference the query as part of the variable output. That made me, I was like, oh, this doesn't feel right. This makes me uncomfortable. But I think that's one of the ones that's breaking now too. Which I would assume is that's where the 500,000 lines comes from. It's like the queries.
Almost certainly form. It's probably form and query.
Yeah.
So if
These
anyone,
guys are
if anyone,
fairly-
if anyone needs any pointers about kind of how to changing out, not on the scoping side of things, that's kind of your kind of just got to go through that. But on the if you need to switch your algorithms, look at the Ben and Ryan show we did with Justin Scott. I'll try and find a link here and share it with everybody. But he went into some techniques, and we discussed that with Ben also on how to change your algorithms, and if you've used it for password encryptions and what you need to do. Some of the suggestions include where anyone with a new password, if someone's creating a new one or resetting their password, you do it to them first, and then over time you slowly get most of the people. So it's not just everyone has to change their password because you can't read their passwords, obviously.
Right.
And then after, like, let's say a year or 6 months, anyone who hasn't changed it, then you go ahead and just force them to reset it. And you just send them a message saying, "Oh, hey, you haven't used your system in 6 months. We're requiring you to change your password," and then they can go about it if they care to. So that's kind of a good way to do that. CSG's asking, query scope is going to break.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think you can't. I don't think you'll be able to refer to a column without it being like query.column, I think.
Actually, wait a minute. No, hold on. I was just doing that. No, I don't think that. I think it's above that. I think it's form. I don't think it's query. Yeah, I think it's form URL server cookie. Ooh, what else? Yeah, I think because it's technically isn't. Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't that considered a closure then inside of a query loop?
I don't know. I think it's just an implicit scope. I don't know. I mean, look, I have to misinform people at least once an episode to keep it exciting.
But I was just thinking about it because I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I just wrote. I'm doing all my development now, all my demos and stuff in CF25, and I don't have any flags set. I just have the raw install, and I just wrote a query, and I didn't scope those. So. I know. Look at my stuff and cry.
So basically, what we're talking about is the engine will not continue to go up the chain to try to find a variable in a upper level scope.
Right. It'll go some chain, but not all chains.
Yeah. To give you an example, I actually I've seen this done a fair number of times. And so it was, let's say you've got a variable that could be coming from either a form or a URL, and never do that, obviously, right? But some people would write their stuff to where they would just drop that variable without the URL or form, and it would look up the chain, and whichever one of those two existed would just use that one, and it does it in an order, right? So it would grab the first one that it would find, and I actually have seen applications that use that as sort of a quick way to not have to do if else or whatever types of things. That will no longer work. It will just say that variable doesn't exist in the variable scope. All the base scopes that are still allowed to be implicit doesn't exist there. So no, you don't get it.
All right. So CSG's question: should this work?
Yeah, that should. You know what? Let me just, for poops and chuckles here. Let me pull up. You guys keep talking, and I
will talk amongst yourselves.
Yes.
Now, I will mention an upcoming show we have. Let me figure out the date on this one. Brian Riley. So we are recording at the end of January. So we'll be publishing first week of February. Now, we're doing a Ben and Ryan show with Brian Riley, and we're talking about security. He's written a lot of and done a lot of research around security in general, and specifically Cold Fusion security. And so we're going to have him on and kind of go in depth and talk about some of those recent vulnerabilities that are found and how they can be exploited, and kind of raising the concern for people so that they do realize that there is potential there. So you shouldn't just kind of say, oh yeah, no problem, I'm going to go ahead and set that flag, or I'm okay in an earlier version. That you really should look at this, and even some proactive measures that you can take to kind of protect yourself. Dave, I mentioned I'd come to you. Dave, you're welcome to join us on the actual show, or you can throw your question out there.
While he's doing that, I'll just say that one thing that I've never quite felt confident in, and that's to put it generously, is sort of the relationship between Cold Fusion as an application server and the version of the JVM and the version of Tomcat. It's all been kind of a black box for me. And I know, so I use Pete Freitag's Hack My CF, and he's constantly telling me that my version of Tomcat is out of date. But I'm like, I don't know. Didn't it just come with Cold Fusion? I wish I had a better grasp on the relationships and what I could take control over versus what I sort of depend on for the kind of top to bottom integration that Adobe provides.
All right, so I'm going to post. Where's my StreamYard? And then I'm gonna grab the. Let me post Dave's question out there and let you guys chat for a second while I grab the link.
And just for anyone who's listening to this in the future, I'll read it here. Hello, all.
Thank you.
I'm wondering how people are storing API keys for other services and other secrets. Passwords we hash instead of storing them, but that doesn't work for other services. Thoughts? I'm not exactly sure what, Dave, you mean by other services. Like services you don't own? Then the decryption keys are in the code. I will admit that I don't necessarily have all the best practices here on the security stuff. I'm still very much in the environment variables holding keys that I can then use to encrypt and decrypt stuff, which I think if you're on the kind of cutting edge of security best practices, not even your application knows kind of how to get those. You call out to a vault kind of a system, and they provision you temporary keys for this kind of stuff. This is beyond my real hands-on experience, though. So
I'll mention a couple. Here's what Black Hat, White Hat Security is posting up here. It's great to see other people kind of chiming in. This is the whole intention of this live show, is to have other people kind of share all their information. And then also posted, not that can be viewed, it's in the processing.
Right. So you're saying Black Hat, White Hat. You're saying that you have a piece of data that you're encrypting at rest, and to encrypt and decrypt that, you're using an encryption key, which itself is being encrypted by another key that your application doesn't have access to, like it's not in the code. I get this is much more advanced than anything I do.
And if anyone has, like Black Hat, if you want to share your contact information, if you want to kind of, if for anyone who is good at this and wants to kind of take things offline, you can always share your information also, or you can come up and join us. I'm going to go ahead and post. Here is a link to the show we did with Justin, and it has some techniques that he's used for some encryption in there. And I don't have his email off the top of my head, but I know I believe he mentioned it at the end of the show, so you can always fast forward, and he's well versed in this as well. And I'll add this here. Yes, the encryption key is in the app CFC.
Now, there's two different layers of encryption, because I know databases, I don't know how common this is, but I know some databases will offer quote unquote encryption at rest, so that if the database is turned off and you break into the data center and you steal the hard drive that is storing the data files, they're encrypted. But that's different than my database is running and I connect to port 3306 and I'm running select statements. It's already been decrypted at that point from the encryption at rest perspective from the storage mechanism. So if you want to then further encrypt the data from like an application accessibility standpoint, then that's something you have to do explicitly in the application code itself, which I think is what we're talking about here.
And Dave,
Yeah, I think
question:
this
how does all that not end up just pushing the secret up a level, but still visible if an intruder got in?
Right. Like the issue here is, where do you keep your keys in the house, right? Like, do you keep them outside the door, inside the door, in a safe that requires a second key, but then there's always still a key or a code that someone has to know to get in? Or is there some way to do an environmental variable that once you put it in, you can never get it back out, but the system knows that that's the key that you have to use? Like, I think that's the question here, which is, I think what you were kind of referring to, Ben, was this idea of vaults, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of vault technologies in the various clouds where you literally just put in, it acts like an environmental variable. You call out to it, and once you put it in, you can't, as Ben, be Nadal, you log in and you can't go and see what does that say. So if someone steals your stuff, they can't really see what that key is. They can't then like steal it back. Like, you would actually literally have to somehow go into the code and like put in a new key, change something else, but even the new key might not work because you don't have that access. So I think that's probably the level that is the top. My argument is always, if they have a certain level of access to your systems, what are the ancillary or adjacent damage that they could do? And is that worse than knowing your API?
Right.
And I wonder if this question is really coming from the perspective of when you go to like a 3-tier application layer. So you're doing a JavaScript front end that has to talk to your backend through an API. So you've got these exposed calls coming to your backend that have to be available to answer those calls. And then how do you secure that? I think that's a completely different environment than having a full stack app running on a backend. Your servers talking to your SQL environment and from the backend, and you're not exposing any of that on the front layer. So I think there's two different things. That's I mean, we run a full stack. We don't run JavaScript on the front end, or we're using more HTMX, which allows us to go back to our full stack roots. And
I love HTMX.
I love it. I love it. So it allows you to get some of that interactivity and everything that the front end JavaScript frameworks give you, but it allows us old timers to stay in our full stack environment and everything. So that's how we deal with the main app. But we do expose some APIs for some customers that need to get data. And the way we do that is basically very old school. We tell them to give us IP, individual IPs or individual IP blocks or ranges that we have in our data store. And then we create a 32 character or 64 character, I don't remember what, random string that we give them as the key that has to come with every request. So the IP and the key has to match the call coming into the API layer, and then they're calling that every day to pick up the latest product inventory changes that occurred. So it's not they're making maybe half a dozen to a couple of dozen calls in the morning on a schedule basis to pick up that inventory information, stick it in their ancillary systems, and then they don't use it. So it's a different use case than having to secure every single transaction that your application makes, because it's going through a publicly available source code that you're giving to people because they're JavaScript-based front ends. And how do you secure that and not have people hijack your APIs? I think that's a different use case, and I don't know that because we're not in that space.
Dave, you had to go, so we missed you. I will jump in for a second. Misha threw something out there, Vault Warden, so you can self-host it and you only allow local trusted network access and get all keys. I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if anyone else is familiar, can speak to that. We probably have about, I'll say probably about 5-10 minutes.
Something I wanted to bring up is just as an Adobe product, we do have the API management product that comes with Enterprise. And that does allow for authentication in a variety of ways, and things like throttling, user management, like all of that is sort of built into that tool. So if you've got CF Enterprise, you already have access to that. Maybe Ryan can speak to whether you could get that running on a VPS over at his company. I don't know if you guys offer that or not.
Yeah, we do. We plug us enough. But you definitely use us. But I'll throw something out to Peter. Peter, do you guys use API Manager?
We don't, but it's something I've looked at a lot.
It's
Okay. If you've
very
not
helpful.
reached out to Charvi, then she's product manager for Adobe. I know in talking with her, she's looking to talk to people who either don't use it and can give feedback on why they don't or features they'd like to see in it, and also people who've using it and same sort of feedback. So if anyone else is out there listening and you are fit in one of those two categories, reach out to Charvi.
Sure.
Yeah, that's an area that's in churn right now internally. Like, we are very interested in learning what our use cases are in the community on that. Whether you're, as Ryan said, whether you're like, oh, this would be really interesting if it had a particular set of features, or we're totally using it right now, we kind of wish it had blah blah blah, or please fix this. Like, we have one customer that's had an ask for a while to ask to fix one particular thing, but they're also our biggest user of the product and love it. It's just there's like a pain point that they have that we're trying to get fixed in there, and it's literally a front end Angular problem. It's not even a back end or anything. It's just Angular. It's whoever wrote the Angular front code for one of the very, very specific niche search pieces in it just kind of fumbled, and it's not broken. It's just not ideal.
That's funny.
But once we fix it, the developer experience will go up quite a bit. So I'm looking forward to that happening.
Nice.
But yeah, that's a great little tool, and people just don't really know about how cool it is and how useful it is, because it's a little bit of a lift to get it in place and running. But once it's running, I mean, they'll scale to the nines, and it's free. It's free with your.
Yeah.
If you already own it.
If you go to the Adobe video section, I know Brian Sappy has a bunch of videos that he did in the past about the subject.
Huge list of videos.
And if you'd like to see new videos, please message Mark. He loves to hear from people who tell you that the stuff on Adobe site is a little dated in content.
Yeah, text me directly at 2 a.m. to let you know.
But yes, or please hit up Charvi or Kishore and let them know that you are using their resources and you'd appreciate something from the last 2 years. That would be handy.
Yeah, we want to hear that stuff. I mean, we really want product input from folks a lot. Please, your voice will be heard, and I think we've made that clear that we have absolutely the feature sets that you're seeing in CF25. The majority come from user feedback. The spreadsheet, I can name the people who got the spreadsheet stuff. Let's just put it that way. And their names, right? That's how we're being very, very responsive to what people are identifying as pain points, because we want to make you happy using the product. So let us know.
And I will do in the last minute here. I will plug some grassroots evangelism that we've talked about in other episodes, and Mark talked about at the CF Summit. That if, let's say that you're part of a local development meetup group that meets, and Mark's going to be doing some traveling, and he would love to get in front of a local group and talk about Cold Fusion. So if you have one that you meet up with, please do an introduction. I know I've been doing that in the Tampa area where I'm from, is working on getting Adobe and Mark in there when he tours. So please reach out to him.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be specifically Cold Fusion. It could just be development, software development, web development. I'd love to just tell people about CF. Maybe they're not familiar, or they haven't heard about it in 20 years. That's the common refrain. Like, oh, didn't that die 20 years ago? And I'm like, I don't know, but my checks keep cashing. So I think probably not. By the way, CF25 is coming in a few weeks. So yeah, no, we're not dead. But yeah.
Nice.
Please do that grassroots. Well, guys, this is, I mean, for a first live event, I'm going to put this down as a success.
I had fun.
Yeah. We had Peter join us from the audience. We had people asking questions, answering questions. This is good. So we'll see on the cadence. We know at least once a month now. We'll see if that increases, and maybe we'll pass the baton and have others kind of host these. Because I'm welcome to host stuff all the time. I don't care about that. But it's really the audience who this is catering towards, and kind of giving an open mic for them to share their experiences. So if we can do that and we can make it more often, we may do something like that. But guys,
Noise.
Peter, Mark, thank you very much. Ben, I didn't have a thing set up for this week as far as you're my Arnold Schwarzenegger to my Danny DeVito. That worked so well in our last show. We'll end with that. So, guys, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you,
Peter, Mark, for being part of the show. And as my buddy Ben always says, cheers.
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 Catch you next time.